All right, guys, just want to welcome back to Everything Cultural Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, our 2024 preview and prediction for the Boston College Eagles. Looking at this coaching staff, it's a different one. Bill O'Brien takes over, spent last year at the New England Patriots. Will Holling, he's been with Bill O'Brien since 2013 at every other destination. Tim Lewis will be the DC, a guy who had been in the UFL since 2018. Is a former NFL defensive coordinator, though, but has been in a completely different level of competition for a while. And obviously, the biggest headlines, Jeff Hafley unexpectedly departs late in the cycle. And let's go ahead and talk about this, Nick, because, he decided to leave incredibly late. January 31st of this year, he decides to go be the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator, which leads them kind of in flux. The program that is in terms of who they'll be good to hire. And I think O'Brien, for the situation, not a bad hire one bit, especially since he was kind of looking for a job in his own right. A guy who's done good work in the past as a head coach, been a respectable defensive coordinator as well. This is a guy that's, had a lot of success in his coaching career, Nick. But I think the biggest reason you look at Hafley departing after pretty much saving his job, going 7-6 last year, cooling off that seat immensely, is the NIL era is just making things incredibly tough for a program that's only going to only win 6 to 8 games per season. And now you look in this era here, and it seems like Hafley was just not ready to, indulge in that type of behavior, and that's why he decides to bolt. What do you make of his departure, and what do you think of the staff, which is kind of interestingly put together?
Hafley could be the first of many coaches that bolt to the NFL or assistant jobs to avoid the day in, day out of recruiting in the NIL era. We also saw Chip Kelly end up becoming an offensive coordinator, which was a domino effect due to the fact that Bill O'Brien took this job and ended up becoming the head coach here, when he was originally slated to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State after spending a year in the NFL after previously spending a couple years as Alabama's OC. After previously being a head coach at Penn State and the Houston Texans. At Penn State, he obviously, Bill O'Brien inherited a program that was riddled by sanctions and loss of scholarships and did pretty well considering what they were dealing with down there in Happy Valley, going 15-9 across 2 seasons. He was ineligible for the Big Ten title game or bowl games or the coaches poll, but still at 8-4 and second in their division in 2012 and 7-5 and third in division in 2013 was solid. In the NFL, he was solid, right? Won 4 division crowns with Houston, took them to the playoffs in those 4 years. Solid numbers before that tenure ended pretty abruptly in a tough fashion for him. Now he finds himself back as a head man as Hafley. He goes to the NFL, where I think is better suited for him. He was a guy that wasn't a head coach very often. It was his first head coaching gig when he took the Boston College job. Prior to that, he was a DB coach at a bunch of different NFL teams, as well as Rutgers and Pitt, plus a stint as a 1-year stint as the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State, where that 2019 Ohio State defense was a pretty solid unit. I can't blame Hafley for going. With the way that the sport is going, it's got to be very difficult to be a head coach right now with keeping up with the NIL, the recruiting, and all that. And for a program like Boston College, that was their ceiling, right? What he did last year, winning a bowl game at Fenway, basically on home soil, going in 7-6, that was the ceiling with this team. They were never going to get better than that, and I think he saw the writing on the wall, decided to take a better, more comfortable gig in the NFL with a good Green Bay Packers defense.
Now you look at the Boston College offense, lost 11 guys in the portal, added 6, though, on top of 7 returning starters. Thomas Castellanos transfers over from UCF and instantly was, a superstar for them. Proved to be a good dual threat player, even though he really wasn't all that great of a passer. Electric runner, though, with speed, agility, and elusiveness. Again, struggled to be accurate through the air, made plenty of mistakes looking to force it, to make plays. Overall 14 interceptions, undersized player at 5'10", 196. Obviously, there's a lot of growth here still left on the table. The biggest concern is, Bill O'Brien going to use the strengths of Castellanos, which I think is certainly questionable with things he's done in the past. A guy that wasn't all that great through the air, Nick, did just enough at times. Running the ball, that was splendid, over 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns. It really was a saving grace for this offense. They were tough to guard throughout the year. I mean, they had a 5-game winning streak at one point. Granted, they were all close games against maybe lower-tier opponents like Army, Virginia, and UConn. But a big reason why they were able to win these games and make a bowl game was because of Castellanos and his playmaking.
Castellanos is a really interesting player. He had a solid bowl game at the Fenway Bowl as well, which was a really close game, and they ended up beating SMU. Basically, like I said, basically a home game, a really solid crowd for them that day. He was 57% completion rate last year, 2,200 yards passing, 15 passing touchdowns, 14 picks though. So that's a really tough ratio when you look at that. A really solid runner, obviously, 1,100 yards on the ground and 13 touchdowns for him, plus 5.2 yards per carry. So good numbers there. He's a true dual threat guy. You're going to see him run a whole lot this year. Bill Bill O'Brien's obviously going to have to draw up an interesting playbook here where they're going to rely more on running. He didn't have Bryce Young run as much as people thought he might during his tenure at Alabama. There were a lot of questions about whether or not Bryce Young could have been a true dual threat. He ended up being more of a pocket passer during his time in Tuscaloosa, only really scrambling if he needed to, and a lot of that was down to the play calling that Bill O'Brien put together. He is a true dual threat here that he has to try and find a way to get the best out of, because if they rely on passing a whole lot here, they're going to throw a lot of picks, put themselves in a lot of tough situations. I don't think that's the recipe for success for the Boston College Eagles.
And I certainly think they need to continue to stick to that formula with the running back and Treshaun Ward that they added from Kansas State. Should really help this ground game even more after putting up about 200 yards per game last year. A thin player, the frame isn't all that big. He's a quick, athletic player, though, with great vision and speed. Didn't have much athleticism last year alongside Castellanos, and now they do. They also get back top running back Kyle Robachek, more physical downhill runner, has good ball security. Jordan McDonald is 6'1", 220, didn't see the field at all for UCF. He transfers in. They get back veteran Alex Broom at 5'6", 192 as well. Good backfield here, Nick. I love the addition of Ward. Him and Castellanos and maybe the option game all year long can really just rain down terror on opponents. And I think, considering, again, they had 200 a game last year, they can certainly elevate that bar even more, maybe an extra 20 to 50 yards per game potentially. This is very exciting of what they have. Again, they got to use them properly, though.
This is a good running back room with Treshaun Ward, who they add, who I think is a really fun, exciting back who can do a whole lot here. And then Kyle Robachuk as well is a really good back, 780 yards rushing for him, 4.8 yards per carry, 8 scores last year. With the quarterback play who can really run the ball, is a really solid, aggressive runner. That's about 2,000 yards of returning production on the ground last year. Adding in Ward as well, this is a very strong running back unit and running room. This is a team that ran the ball very well last year, nearly 200 yards per game, a top 15 unit in the country. They're going to certainly have to rely on that again this year if they want to find success.
Now you look at the wide receiver room. I like the 2 transfers they added. Jerron Bradley from Texas Tech was a consistent option out wide for them. Saw lots of targets, 1,200 yards in 2 years. Jaden McGowan from Vanderbilt was a talented player. Was unable to fully showcase his talents with the doors, though. Lewis Bond, a versatile player that was the leading pass catcher for this team at 5'11", 188. Jaden Skeet saw a few receptions. Dino Tomlin is back and was the 3rd leading pass catcher, but no scores for him, while Reed Harris saw only 1 game. Pretty solid wide receiver group here. Like that the top 3 starters are back. Backups were all in the program as well last season. Jeremiah Franklin was the starting tight end in 23. And they added a respectable one, Kamari Morales from UNC. I think this is, a group that's very capable of making some plays throughout the year, Nick. Again, everyone they get back was pretty much in the program last year, regardless of the role. And McGowan and Bradley, I'm shocked they ended up at Boston College. I thought they would have had some other suitors they could have went to. I think that certainly speaks a little bit of volumes to what the staff can accomplish.
This is a staff that does have some solid players. They add some solid pieces from the portal as well that you were alluding to. I think this is a good staff that can bring in different players like Bradley and McGowan, who I think are really solid adds. Bond, your top returning pass catcher, 646 yards receiving, 12.5 yards per grab, and 7 scores for him. Dino Tomlin as well, 12 yards receiving for him, 13 yards per grab. Jeremiah Franklin, 166 yards receiving, 13.8 yards per grab, and 1 score. And then Jaden Skeet only played in 7 games. He had 157 yards receiving and 1 touchdown for him on 13.1 yards per grab as a true freshman last year. They returned some nice players. Franklin's a really good tight end who I think they're going to get a lot of targets to this year. I like what this room has. I think this is a solid room top to bottom. As long as the quarterback's accurate, I do think this is a good unit with some nice adds.
You look at the offensive line. Logan Taylor wasn't all that bad of a left tackle. Returns after allowing 3 sacks, 6'7", 308 is his bill. Jack Conley was mainly used as an extra lineman or a swing right tackle. Appears to be slotting in at full-time left guard. Drew Kendall is one of the better centers in the conference. Veteran Dwayne Aulick has some major shoes to fill with the departing Christian Mahogany there at right guard. Ozzie Trapillo was a really good right tackle, I thought, for the Eagles. Unit was a good one for BC, should be again, but guard spots need to be monitored for potential weakness here. What's the expectation for the O-line, Nick? A unit that's pretty quietly been pretty good under Jeff Hafley, but obviously the rest of the team did not click enough for them to be able to fully showcase their talents. But now they lose a great player, Mahogany, and that could certainly lead to some big weakness, but I don't think it should fully just cause them to collapse.
Not a bad unit at all. Mahogany obviously is a tough loss, but Jack Connolly and Dwayne Aulick are 2 solid veterans who have got some good experience. Logan Taylor's a good left tackle as well. I think the center play, Drew Kendall, he's a decent player. These guys are all at least juniors or redshirt juniors on this offensive line. So they have a lot of guys that have been in the program for a couple of years or been in other programs that have transferred over. This is a nice unit. They're going to regress a little bit. I do think this is a unit that still has some nice production and productivity. They're a strong physical unit. That's not too bad for this conference.
You look at the offensive verdict. The Eagles' O was certainly annoying to try and contain. Just ask Florida State and Louisville, as they were good at generating explosive plays. Running back room is better. Wide receiver group is better. Castellanos should certainly improve a good deal at throwing the ball behind an above-average O-line. Offense will be fun to watch as long as O'Brien plays to their strengths, and that's a heavy dose of run game, a lot of option game, and variety, and this versatility they provide. And I think that's certainly kind of iffy right now. I hate to keep bashing O'Brien, but I think it's certainly something that's feasible, when you say.
This is something that is feasible. I think this is an offense that has some nice pieces. O'Brien, I'm a little concerned about his play calling, what he's going to be able to do with this offense. I think the passing, they have to run the ball a whole lot. This is a unit that ran the ball a ton last year. They're going to have to continue to do that this year. The passing, I do worry about that. I think Bill O'Brien's play calling at Alabama leaves some questionable desires, but overall this is an offense I think has some upside as long as they're able to efficiently run the ball and the offensive line holds up.
And I do want to clarify, Bill O'Brien will not be the guy calling the plays, but Will Holling, the offensive coordinator, has been with him for over a decade now, so whatever scheme he wants is going to be the scheme that's run, so whatever he calls for at the end of the day is what we're going to get. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, unit returns to 7 starters, added 6 guys in the portal, only lost 5. The defensive line needs to be much better. Donovan Izarorki is their best player. Been a stout run defender. Everyone around him, though, needs to step up. Neto Akapala was no good at all at the other edge spot. Edwin Collins was much more stable and should see some more time this year. Quinn Hutchins and Clive Wilson only saw a few snaps each last year. Returned some vets on the interior D-line. George Rooks, only 280 pounds, wasn't all that good. Cam Horley, on the other hand, was very good. At 6'3", 5'15", he's going to be the anchor here. Kawan Williams, a below-average rotational piece. They did add Cedarius McDonald from Illinois, who saw nearly 200 snaps last year. This D-line has 2 standouts, that being, Horsley and Izararku. But they lose a few quality players as well. They were awful versus the run. Nick 121st there. Only had 13 sacks all year long, which is one of the worst marks in the nation. A lot of improvement needs to take shape here, and I just don't know if it's going to happen.
I don't know if they're going to be able to get the improvement as well. I think Izarorki is an incredible player, the best player on this defense. 53 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, plus a pass breakup. Certainly a guy you want to keep your eye on if you're watching this team. He's a big physical player on that defensive line. Coming off on that right side, a very strong, fun player. Definitely got to keep on Nito Opaka as well. 26 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Decent numbers there. Nice returning Cam Horsley. In the middle is a guy that they return. They want to expect more out of him. 41 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss for him. He's got to step up a little bit at nose tackle. George Rooks as well. He needs to find a way to step up in the middle of the pack guy at 29 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks for him as well. Some decent production here, some solid pieces. Obviously, they have a great player in Izarorki, who's a really good leader for this defensive line. Some other guys you highlighted there that could potentially step up. This is a unit that's got to be better this year. They were not great against the run at all last year, 121st in the nation, one of the worst units in the country. They got to find a way to improve that and be stronger against the run.
The middle of the defense led by Cam Arnold, a good above-average player for them at linebacker. Didn't generate any negative plays, but was consistent in terms of efficiency versus the run. Bryce Steele didn't play last year, but was awful in the 2 years before that. Hoping he's made some big strides and can be a leader. Owen McGowan only saw a few snaps. Devon Crouch, a player that will likely see more time, as he was pretty admirable in his limited appearances. Jalen Blackwell played in 7 games, pretty poor tackler. Sione Hala was a pleasant surprise. They should improve at linebacker. Lots of experience gained last year. No real standout. They can collectively march forward, I would say, at linebacker, Nick. And we already talked about a team that's probably going to struggle again against the run. What do you think will happen with this linebacking core, especially if they can showcase some growth?
I think Cam Arnold's a solid player that they return. A guy that's a player that's been around the program, a good veteran player, 66 total tackles, your top returning tackler, 3 tackles for loss for him. I do think he's a decent player. Bryce Steele, he needs to find a way to get a little bit better this year, be involved in the rotation. Didn't play a whole lot last year as well. You highlighted some other players there that could potentially be involved at linebacker. Jalen Blackwell, Sione Hala as well. 2 guys that didn't play a whole lot. Blackwell had 11 total tackles last year in 7 games. Owen McGowan had 8 total tackles last year. Didn't look good during his snaps. Want to see more out of him. This linebacking core has to step up, has to be better in the middle of the defense this year.
Now you look at the secondary. The loss of Elijah Jones at corner is major. Amari Jackson, he's the next best player in coverage. Saw lots of snaps, so will take over as CB1. Max Tucker will see an increased role as well as Jalen Cheek, who saw plenty of time last year. He and Kari Johnson, who wasn't a bad player, will be in the slot. Should see more time this season, though. Cole Batson wasn't any good at safety. Victor Nelson, in less than 150 snaps, wasn't really any better. Spent 3 years with Ohio State, though. Saw 400 snaps in his career. A valuable add to the other safety spot. KP Price, who saw a good amount of reps, will likely back him up. And again, Elijah Jones had 5 interceptions last year. The rest of the unit, only 3. Secondary had a few rough outings last year, and overall they were quite good. Teams did focus on just abusing them on the ground more often than not, though. So I would say that sample size may be a little skewed. Secondary was not all that great, though, Nick, last year. But again, some of the opponents they played weren't all that tough, like the Service Academy and Army, UConn, Syracuse, whatnot. I think the secondary is relatively a poor unit. I mean, the game they had against the Qs, they were able to snag 4 interceptions, and I think they had like a receiver playing quarterback or something in that game. I don't think the secondary is going to be all that great this season, but now their best playmaker's gone.
The numbers are certainly skewed. When you look at them, you might jump off the screen and say, oh, wow, 26th in the nation against the pass, 197.2 pass yards per game, so under 200 yards per game. Wow, that's not a bad number at all, but it's like they really weren't that tested. You just rattled off a bunch of facts there. I think Amari Jackson is a good player. I think Jackson is a solid piece. 39 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a pick, and a pick 6 for him, and a pass breakup. Solid numbers. Cole Batson, he's got to improve. 37 total tackles, 2 pass breakups for him. Carney Jackson as well, or Johnson that is, he's got to improve. 28 total tackles. They got to find some improvements out. Some other guys further down the depth chart. Jalen Cheek didn't play a whole lot last year. 26 total tackles, 3 pass breakups. He was decent in coverage. This is a unit that's got to step up in general. This whole message for the defense here is they got to find a way to step up. Got to be stronger. I know the parts aren't phenomenal. There's not a whole lot of incredible athletes here, but they got to find a way to step up as a whole unit so they don't get blown out in some of these games.
I do want to fact check myself there. Carlos Delvillo Wilson is an actual quarterback. He was the one playing that game where they had 4 picks. Syracuse last year, late in the year, had a tight end at quarterback. That's how poor they were. So that is inaccurate there. Looking at the verdict for this defense, the Eagles return a good bit of experience and some depth and should see an improvement all across the board, but I still think they will be a liability versus the run and a tad worse versus the pass. Were able to recover a good amount of fumbles last year to help kind of offset the lack of non-Elijah Jones turnovers. And, obviously no pass rush one bit. Trench is still pretty weak, I would say, despite a few good players. Looking at the final prediction for Boston College, the Eagles lost their head coach late in the cycle, but landed a respectable bridge coach in Bill O'Brien. Offense will be interesting to watch with the athletic ability in the backfield matched with electric QB and some good pass catchers. Defense, on the other hand, should improve, but overall just won't be able to match up in the trenches versus most of their schedule. Played lots of close games, though, and certainly prospect to do the same in 2024, but can they be on the winning side more often than not? If they cut down on the turnovers, should be able to. It'll be an interesting team to watch, Nick. And one thing I also want to ask is how serious will Bill O'Brien take this job? And I think that might lead to him maybe being more aggressive. That could be beneficial for this football team, but I just called him a bridge coach a second ago because I just don't envision him being here for 3 or 4 years trying to build up this program, Nick. So again, I think that could certainly lead to them playing with some desperation, which could also lead to better results. 5 wins for me. I think this rushing attack's going to be fun to watch, and some of those receivers will make some big-time plays. Other than that, I'm probably not going to watch much BC football because there's not many reasons to.
I went 4-8 with this team this year. I agree with you. Not a whole lot of reason to watch this team. This team was fun at times last year. I saw them play in person at Fenway Bowl and was impressed during that game. I thought Hafley was a great coach. Enjoyed speaking with him. He ends up leaving Bill O'Brien, who terrorized me as an Alabama fan with some of his offensive play calls during the Bryce Young era and the end of the Saban era. So I'm not a biggest fan of Bill O'Brien. I think it's a good hire, right? Objectively speaking, late in the cycle, they got a good coach here. I don't know how long he sticks around. I'm totally on the board with you there. I don't really know if this is a guy that's going to be there forever. You don't really know what the vision is with this team. They really seem to be just kind of struggling at this point. They're in the ACC. They seem really out of their depth. They're a team that really, at best, they're going to make a bowl game. That's kind of the goal, is to make it win a bowl game. This team is nowhere near the levels they were with Matt Ryan, where they were, a powerhouse for that one period of time when he really led the way for this team. An incredible quarterback he was. This team just really can't compete, in my opinion, in the NIL era. Back then, you could plug a guy in, get a guy like Matt Ryan, and have some fun and go on a run. I just don't think we're going to see teams like that often anymore. I think BC is going to continue to struggle. This schedule is also tough, right? At Florida State, at Missouri, at Virginia Tech are all really tough games. I have them losing to Syracuse as a game. You have them winning potentially. Also at SMU, forgot to mention the conference newcomers that they beat in the bowl game last year. I think SMU enact revenge from that. Should be a tough year one for Bill O'Brien. I'm not too sure what his vision is or what the vision entirely is with this program. I hope they figure it out, because I do think this is a program that has a good fan base and has a solid foundation. I'm just not too sure what the direction is right now.
Yep, certainly a lack of vision right now in Chestnut Hill. It's going to be for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me breaking down the Eagles.
Looking forward to talking more about the ACC teams.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.